that I read in, the April ones that I read within the last week or so, stated that the victim, or one of the victims, did not want to prosecute Reverend Eliza Gallagher. So this was part of the leading into the discussion of whether or not to report Reverend Gallagher's sexual misconduct to the police. So one of the againsts was the fact that a victim did not want to prosecute. She wanted to retain anonymity, which you might expect, from, let's say, a married member of Wildflower Unitarian Universalist Church. But the other thing is it spoke about age considerations. Now, it wasn't clear. It didn't say that this particular victim was a minor. That's usually, however, where age considerations come into play. There was definitely some question regarding the age of the victim that was being spoken about in the board minutes, the April board minutes. So this does raise a question. Well, wait a minute. On the one hand, you're saying there was one married member of Wildflower who was a victim. And are you saying that this same victim, that there's age questions involved? Are we talking about an underage married member of Wildflower? Or possibly, to take a cue from UUA moderator Jim Key, is it possible that we're talking about an elderly married member of Wildflower? Is the age consideration due to the victim being quite elderly? Not impossible, although generally speaking, one does not think of Unitarian Universalist ministers who engage in sexual misconduct going after the elderly members of the congregation. They're normally going after the young and attractive ones. So there's some questions that need to be answered. There's a free and responsible search for truth and meaning that needs to be undertaken to find out what really happened at Wildflower Unitarian Universalist Church and how it was really handled by church leadership and how it was actually handled by the Unitarian Universalist Association, because it does look as if there's at least a partial cover-up or denial going on there. There are some questions that I believe need to be answered, and so I will try to get answers to those questions in the coming weeks. I will be directly approaching the leadership of the Wildflower Church to find out, what their decision was regarding whether or not to report Reverend Eliza Gallagher's clergy sexual misconduct to the police. And regardless of what that decision was, I will be following up to make sure that the Austin Police and other secular authorities who I believe can come into play, such as the FBI, because Reverend Eliza Gallagher has now moved out of state. She's in Portland. She's no longer in Texas. In fact, she moved out of state very soon after the whole clergy sexual misconduct stuff came to light. She moved to Oklahoma. She was in Oklahoma, I believe Tulsa, Oklahoma, for a while. Which brings us to Reverend Ron Robinson, who is a Tulsa area Unitarian Universalist minister. Unitarian Universalist minister who identifies as being a Christian Unitarian Universalist, who was recently arrested on child pornography charges, not for producing child pornography, but for viewing it and engaging in chat rooms and stuff. And basically, from the sound of it, it was some pretty rough stuff, or at least essentially what it comes down to is Reverend Ron Robinson, after being arrested, confessed to fantasies of raping young children and even murdering young children. So this is a confession on the part of Reverend Ron Robinson. So one wonders, what exactly, he was up to. In any case, it's just kind of interesting that, that here's this Unitarian Universalist minister who's found to have had sexual relations with a member of Wildflower Unitarian Universalist Church, one who might possibly be a minor, or one of them. Like I said, this is the thing, is I don't doubt that she did in fact have sexual relations with a married member of Wildflower. But the question is were there other victims, and was at least one of these victims a minor? Or for that matter, is it an elderly person? So yeah, there's definitely questions. And that whole age thing calls up some serious questions, because you just do not associate married women with underage people as a rule. I mean, yes, of course there are young married, there are teenagers who get married. Heck, now that I think about it, Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell married a teenage Tibetan refugee back in the 90s. The same Mac Mitchell who was convicted of raping teenage Tibetan refugees actually married one. Oh, and guess what? It was another Unitarian Universalist minister who performed that marriage. So yes, it's possible that Reverend Eliza Gallagher sexualized her relationship with a very young member of Wildflower Church. That's a possibility. So yeah, I'm going to try and find out what the truth is. I'm going to practice Unitarian Universalism's fourth principle and engage in a free and responsible search for the truth and meaning of what really happened at the Wildflower Unitarian Universalist Church, and look into whether or not Texas is one of those states that actually has mandatory reporting, and that members of Wildflower Church disregarded that and did not report Reverend Eliza Gallagher's sexual misconduct to the police, and so on. And we'll see what comes of that. And anyhow, the whole culture of secrecy that the Unitarian Universalist Association, and by extension the Unitarian Universalist religious community as a whole, wallows in, is pretty pathetic. There's even other recent developments. I don't know if I think I might have already spoken about it maybe last week, but the former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, William Schultz, yes, I did speak about it. I remember now, because I remember having a little play on words with Schultz and Skulks. So in any case, Reverend Dr. William F. Schultz, or Skulks, depending on how you want to pronounce it, or Schultz, is a former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. He's also a former president or executive director of Amnesty International USA, and he's also a former president or executive director of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, and indeed he's their president emeritus at the moment. In other words, he's got this title of president emeritus, and he recently threatened to sue Reverend Gail Seavey and the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association because he did not like something that Reverend Gail Seavey said about him in last year's Berry Street essay. I could tell you right now what she said, and which Reverend Bill Schultz effectively not only tried to hide, but succeeded in hiding, because he was able to bully Reverend Gail Seavey and the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association into redacting the transcript of her Berry Street message so as to remove what he didn't want to be there. And they're also in the process of editing the video so that the video doesn't show what Reverend Gail Seavey said about Reverend Bill Schultz. Schultz, whatever. So again, this is all, you know, secrecy upon cover-up upon cover-up. Oh, no, and this is actually does bring us back around to Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, because Reverend William Schultz was president of the Unitarian Universalist Association at the time that the whole Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell rape case came to light. And there is, in fact, a newspaper report in the Telegraph and Globe, I think is what it was called, or is called, of a certain Massachusetts city whose name escapes me at the moment. So anyway, there's this newspaper report, you know, in one of these smaller, you know, community newspapers in Massachusetts, which suggests, or actually it states plainly that the church members who had been informed about Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's sexual activities with teenage Tibetan refugees who he had lured away from India with promises of a better life in America, you know, these were reported at some point to I believe an intern minister or a less senior minister, Mary Traynor, and also a couple of board members of the Westboro Unitarian Universalist Church. And what happened is you know, they approached the UUA about this, and the UUA made arrangements, or started to make arrangements, for what's described as a confidential investigation, which suggests to me that they sought to have the girls sign a confidentiality agreement, which would have prevented their rapes from being reported to the police. So we got Shoshona Green going by here. Shoshona Green is part of the cover-up efforts, who supervises the